There was a rulebook. For decades, there was a very specific, very understood, very rarely questioned rulebook for how a Latin artist was supposed to operate if they wanted to be taken seriously in the American music market. It was not written down anywhere. Nobody handed it to you on your first day, but everyone in the industry knew it existed, and the artists who ignored it paid for it in airplay, in mainstream coverage, and in the kind of subtle institutional dismissal that does not leave fingerprints but absolutely leaves damage. The rules went something like this. Learn some English, record at least one crossover single, collaborate with an American pop star whose name opens doors yours does not yet open, soften the edges, translate yourself, make it easier for the audience to come to you by going most of the way to meet them first. Bad Bunny read the rulebook. He is clearly intelligent enough to understand exactly what it said. And then he did something that nobody in the Latin music world had done at the scale he was about to do it. He put it down and walked away from it, in public, at full volume. And what happened next is still being felt across every corner of the music industry right now. Shh, turn the volume up, but keep it low. This is rap deepest secrets, the one place the labels can't control, exposing the codes, the cover-ups, the real cost of fame. Now, back to the video. Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio grew up in Vega Baja, Puerto Rico. He started uploading music to SoundCloud while working at a supermarket. No major label infrastructure, no industry connections, no crossover strategy designed by executives in a boardroom somewhere deciding which version of this artist was most marketable to the widest possible American audience. Just music, reggaeton and Latin trap rooted so specifically in Puerto Rican culture that there was no way to separate the sound from where it came from without destroying what made it work. Lyrics in Spanish, not Spanish with English hooks, not Spanish verses and English choruses, not Spanish with an asterisk, Spanish. All of it, all the time, with a melancholic flow that was unlike anything the genre had produced at that level before. Something that could be a party anthem and a gut punch simultaneously, and somehow make both feel like the point. The industry saw it coming before most listeners did, because what Bad Bunny was building was not just a fan base, it was a gravity well, the kind of cultural force that does not expand outward toward an existing audience, but pulls a new audience inward toward itself, creating listeners rather than finding them. And once that kind of gravity gets going, it does not stop because of language barriers. It stops when the music stops, and the music has not stopped. For a long time, the music industry measured Latin artists by how thoroughly they could cross over into English-language pop. That was the metric. That was the ceiling. That was the implicit argument being made every time a Latin artist was encouraged to record in English or collaborate with a mainstream American name. That the destination worth reaching was the English-language mainstream, and the path to that destination required some level of translation. Bad Bunny did not cross over. He did not travel toward the mainstream. He built something so undeniably significant in his own lane that the mainstream had no choice but to travel toward him. And that distinction, which sounds subtle but is actually the difference between submission and revolution, is the thing that changed what Latin stardom is allowed to look like permanently. When Debí Tirar Más Fotos won the Grammy for Album of the Year in 2026, the first Spanish-language album ever to win that category in the awards history, the Recording Academy was not doing Bad Bunny a favor. The Recording Academy was catching up. The album had already won in the only court that actually matters, the one where hundreds of millions of people vote by pressing play and pressing it again. The Grammy was the institution acknowledging what the audience had already decided. That reversal, audience first, institution second, is what the rulebook never accounted for, because the rulebook was written in an era when institutions decided what the audience was allowed to discover. That era is over, and Bad Bunny's career is the clearest evidence that it is over. The next part of this story is where the story stops being about one artist and starts being about something that every creative person, in music, in film, in any field where the gatekeepers have historically decided who gets through, needs to hear clearly. Before we get there, subscribe to the channel right now. Hit the button, turn on notifications. This is the channel that takes the career and finds the blueprint inside it, the lesson underneath the milestone, the thing that matters beyond the streaming numbers and the award wins. Subscribe, then stay. Because what Bad Bunny actually built is bigger than a music career, and the twist is almost here. Debí Tirar Más Fotos is not a party album. It is not a collection of radio-friendly singles designed to maximize playlist placement and streaming numbers. It is an album about historical memory, personal regret, cultural pride, and the specific grief of watching the place you came from change in ways you did not choose and cannot reverse. The title track translates roughly to, "I should have taken more photos." It is a song about wishing you had documented the people and places and moments that mattered before they were gone. About realizing too late that the ordinary details of everyday life were actually extraordinary, and that you didn't know that until ordinary became impossible to access again. It contains a line about hoping his people never move away. Simple, personal, devastating in context. This is not the kind of album that a superstar at the peak of their commercial power is supposed to make. The conventional playbook at that career stage says consolidate, make hits, give the audience more of what made them fall in love with you. Do not pivot to an album about Puerto Rican cultural identity, traditional plena and bomba ritmos, and the emotional cost of displacement. Do not collaborate with a young group called Los Pleneros de la Cresta, who are keeping a traditional sound alive that mainstream audiences have never heard of. Do not make your most commercially successful moment also your most culturally specific and artistically risky one. Bad Bunny made that album anyway, at his peak, on purpose, and it became the biggest album of his career, which is either the most suspicious thing that has happened in pop music in years, or the most logical if you understand what he actually built.
Here is the part that reframes everything. The album that won the Grammy, the album that broke the Billboard record, the album that sent him to the Super Bowl stage. None of it was a sudden pivot. None of it was a calculated reinvention designed to catch an audience off guard. It was a continuation, the logical destination of a journey that Bad Bunny announced he was on from the very beginning, in songs that people were dancing to without fully hearing what he was saying. When Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico in 2017, and he released Estamos Bien, an anthem not designed for radio rotation but for the people of his island who needed to hear that they could get through it, he was telling you who he was. When Titi Me Preguntó used Dembow to tap into the specific, universally Caribbean memory of being a kid at a family party and getting asked the same question by every adult in the room, he was telling you what kind of artist he intended to be. One who found the universal inside the hyper-specific, one who trusted that the most personal details were also the most resonant. And when Debí Tirar Más Fotos arrived with that title track, the line about wishing he had taken more photos, the reference to his brother having the boy and his best friend having the girl, the private geography of his actual life embedded in a commercially dominant song, he was doing what he had always been doing, making music so specific that it felt like he was talking directly to you. Because the more specific the truth, the more people it reaches. That is the counterintuitive genius that the music industry's rulebook never fully understood. He did not rewrite the rules of Latin stardom by breaking them dramatically and publicly. He rewrote them by proving, one album at a time, that the rules were based on a false premise. The premise that audiences needed familiarity before they could connect, that language was a barrier, that culture required translation to travel. None of that was true. It was just what the gatekeepers believed, and Bad Bunny spent a decade demonstrating the difference between what the gatekeepers believed and what the audience was actually ready for. The audience was always ready. The rulebook was just in the way. Here is the honest friend truth, the part I would say to anyone who is sitting on something real and being told to soften it, translate it, make it more accessible, meet the audience in the middle. The middle is not where the best things live. The most specific, most personal, most unapologetically rooted creative work is almost always the work that travels the farthest. Not because niche is better than accessible, but because authentic is more magnetic than palatable. And when you make something that is completely, specifically, uncomplicatedly true to who you are and where you come from, the people who connect with it do not just like it, they feel found by it. And people who feel found do not stop listening. They bring other people, they defend it, they make it part of their identity. They build a gravity well for you that no marketing budget could manufacture. Bad Bunny did not become the second most streamed artist in Spotify history by making music for everyone. He became the second most streamed artist in Spotify history by making music for his people, specifically, honestly, without apology, and trusting that the rest of the world would find it to it. They did, in numbers that rewrote what the industry thought was possible for a Spanish-language artist. The Rulebook said adapt. He said no. And the Grammy stage, the Super Bowl halftime show, the Billboard records, and 600 million Spotify users said he was right. There was a rulebook, Bad Bunny read it and walked away from it. And in the decades since, he has won a Grammy for Album of the Year with the first Spanish-language album ever to do so, headlined the Super Bowl in Spanish, tied the all-time Billboard record, and become the second most streamed artist in Spotify history, not by meeting the world in the middle, by making the world walk all the way to him. That is not luck. That is what happens when someone knows exactly who they are and refuses to negotiate it, even when the people with the power and the platform and the paychecks are all telling them to. If this channel is where the career becomes the lesson and the milestone becomes the meaning, subscribe right now. Hit the notification bell. Drop a comment. Do you think the music industry has actually learned from what Bad Bunny built, or are they just celebrating him while quietly keeping the old rulebook for everyone else? This community does not do surface-level answers. See you in the next one.